If you're as old as me, you learned about the early Antarctic explorers at school. Shackleton, Mawson, Amundsen, first to the pole. But they are long dead, and Antarctica is forgotten. Until, of course, it's not. So 3 friends decided to take a look and to share some tips if you're planning a trip south of 60. Most of the 100,000 tourists who travel to Antarctica every year depart from Ushuaia, a pretty poor town at the tip of South America near Cape Horn. There's an argument that no tourist should be in Antarctica, and we'll come back to that. From Ushuaia, it's a 2-day trip across the Drake Passage to the Antarctic Peninsula. But if you have the time, consider taking in the Falkland Islands and South Georgia, which is what we did. 21 days, Ushuaia to the Falklands, then on to South Georgia, before heading south across the 60-degree parallel and into Antarctica, returning to Ushuaia across the Drake. Down here, the weather can be brutal. 2 mighty currents converge the Antarctic Circumpolar and the Brazil. Water can flow 8,000 times faster than the Mississippi River, with 40-foot waves, and the Drake Passage itself is a choke point, giving it its fearsome reputation. You're definitely not cruising the Caribbean. Modern tourists enjoy comforts that would have delighted the early explorers, but Antarctica itself has not changed. It is just as wild and as unpredictable, just as dangerous as it always has been. Do your homework, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. For us, the weather between Ushuaia and the Falklands was a welcome anticlimax. The Falkland Islands are intriguing, a remnant of empire with an almost comical attachment to the old country. Yet to appreciate these people, you have to understand that the Falklands War of 40 years ago has never quite finished. John explains.
We'd been in Ushuaia in southern Argentina before, and we'd seen there was quite a fair bit of signage in Spanish reminding us all that the Falklands are actually not the Falklands but Las Malvinas, and they belong to Argentina.
We began to understand these people when a lifelong Falklander and ex-prisoner of war took us to a corner of Mount Tumbledown to an austere cross in memory of the Scots Guardsmen who died capturing this place. Living in a violent ocean with a sometimes unfriendly neighbour, being British here is not comical nor nostalgic. It is simply thriving as a proud and resilient people. Yet the people are only half the story of the Falklands. Cold, nutrient-rich waters flow around the islands, a magnet for multitudes of seabirds and penguins. The 2-day crossing from the Falkland Islands to South Georgia was, again, made in moderate seas. As we ventured further south, we saw the first icebergs, literally shards of ice that had broken away from the ice sheets and floated north. Sometimes when you're travelling, a place has such a dramatic impact you know it will stay with you for the rest of your life. South Georgia is such a place. Imagine one of the most remote slices of land on Earth, about 170 kilometres long, 35 wide. Had nearly 1 million king penguins, half the global population, another 2 million macaroni, gentoo and chinstrap penguins. In summer, 5 million Antarctic fur seals, 95% of every fur seal on the planet, who come here to breed, fight and copulate, a biomass so dense that on most species it's physically impossible for us to land.
South Georgia is extraordinarily dramatic scenery. High rocky outcrops going up to 10,000 feet, snow-capped mountains running straight down into the water. But then you get to the beaches where the wildlife congregate, and nothing can really prepare you for the sheer numbers of penguins and seals on the beaches in all directions. Vast numbers. We're talking many hundreds of thousands of penguins on the beach.
I can't imagine doing the trip without going to South Georgia. As Phil said, the wildlife is staggering.
For all its magnificence, South Georgia is a troubled place. When we visited, avian influenza was killing every species, so another fact of Antarctic cruising, biosecurity. Be prepared to scrub your boots, have your clothes checked for seeds, then scrub again and again and again. In the few places where we could land, we could only walk or stand, no sitting, crouching, kneeling, the only bits touching the ground, our disinfected boots. There was one final stop on South Georgia, Grytviken, the capital. Population, 30. It's legally required to stop here for, of all things, a visa. Like many settlements in the South Atlantic, Grytviken was originally a whaling station.
That, to me, just seeing the whaling station itself was just evokes a very dark chapter. The station itself is in disrepair, of course, and rusting and basically falling apart and being returned to Mother Earth. But it's it's very eerie, and it almost has an evil tone to it. The other thing I'll say about Gudviken is we had an experience of going into the church, which has been restored, and then we had a little concert in there, which was quite special for our particular cruise.
The crossing from South Georgia to the closest tip of the Antarctic Peninsula takes about 2 days. Once we crossed the 60 degrees south line of latitude, we entered Antarctica, geographically, ecologically, culturally, and politically, and chanced upon this cold monster. This is A23A, the world's largest iceberg. 2 Greater Londons could sit atop and still have room to spare. Patrolling the South Atlantic for nearly 40 years.
We'd all hoped to see icebergs, and we would imagine their majesty and their cold blue colours. But to see A23A that's filling the horizon from one extent to the other, 60 kilometres fronting us, nothing in front of the boat could be seen except one iceberg.
I will never walk on Mars, never step off a starship to explore a planet touched by few humans, never be awed by the unearthliness of the place, as every one of us was awed right here in Antarctica. Humans have never made a permanent home here, and from what we saw on Deception Island, they never will. The island is a caldera of an ancient, still active volcano. We were greeted by sulphur fumes welling through the black sand. In the 1960s, eruptions destroyed British and Chilean research stations. The few scientists still on the island leave when each winter comes. Deception Island was our first opportunity to kayak. Kayaking affords connection, not standing on a ship 20 metres above the water, nor scudding in a Zodiac. The kayak is an extension of your hands, your hips, your feet, feeling and reading the water, the force of the breeze, the sounds of humpbacks, not 30 metres away. All companies offer differing experiences, from fun paddles and sit-on-top inflatables to extended expeditions in ocean-capable boats. You are paddling in freezing water under skies that can change rapidly. We trained for a year to confidently handle 30-kilogram kayaks in and out of the water. Be prepared. Don't underestimate Antarctica. Humans are not the only temporary inhabitants of Antarctica. The continent has no land-based mammals nor birds. In the high summer when we visited, the seals, birds and penguins on the beaches are only visitors coming here to rest and reproduce. For most of the year, they leave Antarctica to live in the sea. The relatively lower density of animals on the beaches when compared with South Georgia makes for one crucial difference. Visitors can actually land on Antarctica's beaches. Another highlight was the opportunity to spend a night on the ice. While I preferred my warm dinner on the ship, Phil and John got the full experience.
I had imagined that in Antarctica, a few hundred miles away from the next set of people down here, it would be an extraordinarily peaceful experience. It was not. It was, the night was pierced by cracking sounds from breaking ice and glaciers moving right next to where we were camping, and a continuous fear that during the night large chunks of ice would fall off into the water next to the campsite and the tidal waves would swamp the camp. But it enhanced the experience once we'd survived it.
The cracking noise from the ice is actually often a lot louder and deeper than one might expect. It's quite a boom when the ice cracks above the ice sheet in the higher regions, and sometimes you can see where it's come from and sometimes you can't. So occasionally you'll see some ice fall into the water, other times no, but it's an eerie sound, and as Phil said, it continues throughout the night.
One last activity before returning to Ushuaia was the ultimate test of madness, the polar plunge. While Phil and I decided to sit this one out, John was all in. We caught him afterwards, straight out of the shower.
Well, that was fantastic. That was an exhilarating experience. The expectation was probably more adrenaline boosting than the actual experience in a way. Yes, it was exhilarating. I think that's the best word I can come up with. Not as cold as I expected. Not as cold as I expected. But good fun. Great fun.
After 5 days, we left the Antarctic Peninsula and pushed, with some apprehension, into the Drake Passage. Yet another welcome anticlimax, and within 2 days, the cruise was over. When booking a cruise, the first decision is what type of cruise. You can choose the luxury of a liner, a smaller expedition ship, even come down here under sail. Our ship, the MS Expedition, falls into the small ship category. Whatever way you choose, the strict regulations and healthy competition between operators makes for safe and comfortable cruising. Most cruises have dedicated expedition staff, naturalists, biologists, photographers giving regular lectures, as well as those who get you safely around, Zodiac drivers, mountaineer, kayak guides, and of course catering staff and cleaners. The quality of these people is central to your experience. Get individual names from the company's website, research each one, and whichever company you choose, be confident you're travelling with the best. A must-have resource to research Antarctica in the South Atlantic is the Antarctica Cruising Guide by Peter Carey and Craig Franklin. It covers the places and animals and not just the peninsula, but the entire continent. Have it always with you. Should Antarctic tourism even be allowed? I can answer that in one word: krill. These small crustaceans number in the billions, an Antarctic biomass of nearly 400 million tonnes. Everything in Antarctica, fish, birds, seals, penguins, whales, everything eats krill. Near Cornwallis Island on the peninsula, we witnessed what happens when krill come to the surface. Take away the krill and everything disappears. The next time you're buying a bottle of krill oil, perhaps consider an alternative. The use and human abuse of krill is just one of the many hundreds of knowledge gaps that were filled by coming to Antarctica.
I think anybody thinking of coming to Antarctica absolutely should do it. I would be very attentive to the type of trip you book, because the whole purpose of coming to Antarctica is not entertainment. It's very much about self-education, and coming on a small-scale boat which is dedicated to improving people's understanding of the natural environment and the delicate balance in nature is really the only way to do this and benefit from it. So a small expedition level boat with 100 or so passengers on board, which enables you to interact with the environment and get off the boat and see things up close and personal, but also an expedition that is very sensitive about its impact on the environment and wanting all the passengers on the boat to go away as ambassadors for Antarctica. I think this sort of tourism should be encouraged.
The take-home message for me is that I think people should be encouraged to come here because, well, it's a double-edged sword. They should be encouraged because I think that it does raise one's awareness of our impact on the planet and how important the ecosystem here and in fact anywhere in the world is to our overall global health. But the other side of the double-edged sword is that we need to do it responsibly.
The explorer Jean-Baptiste Charcot asked, "Why do we feel this strange attraction for these polar regions?" Why are we so susceptible to the charm of these landscapes when they are so empty and terrifying? A century later, Antarctica remains south of 60.
How can I help you?
That's right. On the quick stops, I will put them down and don't just smell them on camera.
Great fun.
Great fun. Say that again.
Great fun.